What's up, guys? It's Johnny O with Tito Tech Tube again, and I'm here to bring you part 2 of my How to Build a PC series. So in this part, we're going to show you how to actually put all the parts together that you've now purchased. And the last part, I showed you how to go through the methodology of making sure that you're picking all the correct parts that are all going to be compatible with each other. So if you didn't miss, or if you missed that, go ahead and make sure you check that out. I'm going to put that up in the card over on this side of the screen right here. And once you get done with that, come back to part 2 here and see how to actually put your parts together once you've got them all collected. So the parts in this build are not the same as the parts in my PC part picker list because these are just parts I happen to have on hand. But also, just a quick note, I did lose audio for this recording originally, so I did voiceover on it, so it may be a little awkward, but I should get you through it just fine. Also, audio on this intro and outro may be a little off because I'm in a different location and there's a lot of echo in this room. So hopefully this all turns out okay. Alright guys, stay tuned. Be right back. That was stupid. Let's go! I don't know. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to do is get the standoffs installed for the CPU cooler. So this is the standoff here for the LGA 115X socket. So each of these has a little adhesive pad that's just tacky enough to hold them on when you flip the board upside down. And so now that we have these all in place, I'm going to make sure they're secure. And we're going to flip the board over so we can put the back plate on. So you see here on the back plate, there's 3 holes that line up with the 3 studs coming through on the socket. And there's 3 notches in each of the wings of the back plate. The middle notch for this particular socket is what we want. And here's the nut that we're going to secure the standoffs to the back of the back plate with. And it comes with a socket with a Phillips head on the back end of it to make it easy to screw and tighten it down. So the one thing I did want to note here too is that the studs on the threads have a flat portion that matches up with a flat portion on the back plate that I'll show you here in just a second. But once you line up those 2 flat portions, the studs should just slide straight through just like this. And so you can see here that once it's lined up, it slides through without any issues. Then you can just give it a slight turn to lock it into place. Now I do recommend putting these on in a cross pattern. This will put even pressure on the back plate and just make sure that there's no potential issues from tightening them down too far on one side, maybe bending anything out of shape. And these don't need to be super tight, so I'm just going to use the nut adapter here just to kind of finger tighten them down a bit. And then once they're snug, I'll use the screwdriver just to give them another extra quarter to half a turn just to make sure that they are secure. So I'm going to reach around the front here and hold the standoff as I make sure that everything's good and tight. Alright, so now our standoffs are installed for our CPU cooler. Let's go and move on to the CPU, if I can find it. There it is. So we've got an i5 6600. You'll see in the lower left hand corner of the socket there's a gold triangle that'll line up with a triangle on the socket. So I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and push down this retention arm and slide it out to unlock the socket and pull back to lift the cover. And we're just going to line up the yellow triangle on the CPU with the triangle on the socket and drop it straight in. We're not going to push on it or put any pressure. Drop the cover down, just make sure it's latched up under the screw head there, and put the retention bracket back under its holder. And CPU is now installed. So let's go ahead and do the memory. So you'll want to refer to your motherboard manual to see which DIMM slots to populate if you're not going to populate all 4. So you'll see here that this board has just the latch on one side. Sometimes you'll have latches on both sides that you have to undo to insert the DIMMs. And as you press them down, you should get a nice firm click once they lock into place. And you will notice that there is a notch in the DIMM slot that matches up with a notch on the actual RAM module itself. So you just want to make sure that's lined up before you start pressing down. It will take a little bit of force to attach this, so don't be afraid to give it a good push. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and apply the thermal paste to the CPU. So I'm going with, I guess, the grain of rice method here. This is possibly the most controversial part of computer building, is the thermal paste application. So here I'm just lining up the retention bracket for the Hyper 212 cooler to make sure I've got it set to the right sizing. And then you just fold it in a bit, and so you just slide it over the cold plate. There's a hole there that the notch lines up with, and just sit the cold plate down on the CPU and kind of give it a little smush just to make sure that you spread that thermal paste well. What I'm going to do is just kind of get the first thread or two started on each of the standoffs here by finger, and then I will grab my screwdriver and tighten down each of the 4 screws, again going in a cross pattern and only doing a couple turns at a time, because you want to tighten them down with even pressure to make sure that you get the thermal paste evenly applied to the CPU. Alright, so now that that's done, I've got the case here. We're going to put in our I/O shield and then install the motherboard. The rear I/O shield is possibly the most annoying thing to forget in a PC building process, because if you do that, then you have to basically pull the entire motherboard out, and so you're essentially taking the whole PC apart in order to put that I/O shield back in. So I've already prepped the case here. Obviously I have the side panels off already, and I've taken out the 2 brackets for the PCIe slot for the GPU. So I'm going to line up the I/O with the rear I/O shield and line up the motherboard standoffs with the motherboard. This particular case has a peg for the center standoff, so you only need 8 out of the 9 screws for a full-size ATX board. And so I'm just going to screw in, put 1 screw into each standoff to secure the motherboard into the case. Drop the screw there, so we'll get that back in. I'm going to go ahead and install the CPU cooler fan, I should say, to the Hyper 212, and get that plugged into the header on the motherboard. Alright, I could probably route that cable a little better, but I'm just going to work with it like this for now. What I should have done is rotated the fan 180 degrees so that I could more neatly route that cable, but that's okay. Alright, so I'm going to start plugging in some of the front panel connectors. So there's the HD audio connector, if it'll ever focus on it. There we go. And so this is you're gonna find the header labeled HD audio on your motherboard, and just connect it there. It's going to be keyed, so it will fit only one way. And if this is unclear on your motherboard, you can always check the motherboard manual to verify the installation point. Alright, so we've got our front USB connector. And we're just going to find, usually it'll be like JUSB 1, 2, 3, something like that on the motherboard, depending on how many USB headers you have. So plug that into the USB jumper here. Again, this is keyed and will fit only one way. And here we have the USB 3 header for our front panel USB 3 connector. And yet again, it is keyed and will fit only one direction. here we have the front I/O connectors for the power switch, the hard drive status indicator, the power light, and the reset switch. These are the bane of most builders' existence. However, the ASUS motherboards come with this handy little adapter piece where you can actually plug in all your front panel into this adapter and then plug that directly in to the motherboard. So it actually makes it a little bit easier to manage. Alright, so you can see the front panel connectors hooked in right there. Let me go and plug in this fan. So I'm just going to tuck the cable around the frame of the fan, and it's going to be a little snug in this case to do it, but I'm going to wedge the cable between this little I/O shield on the motherboard and the case of the fan itself. Alright, there we go. And so I'll just plug into this fan header right here. Sorry, my head's in the way of the camera there. And one of these is, I believe, for a water cooling pump, so I'm going to plug into one that's marked as system fan. Again, these are keyed, and sometimes are a little finicky to plug in. There we go. And I'm just going to try and tuck this cable in a little more just to kind of keep it out the way. Alright, perfect. Now we can go ahead and slide the power supply in. And just kind of lay these cables off to the side for now. And shove this guy back there, get it lined up with the screw holes in the back. There we go. So we'll go ahead and take the 4 screws for the power supply and get them attached here. And now we can start routing some of our cables. So first one through is going to be the 24 pin, as it is the most massive cable and is basically the most unwieldy one to manage coming out the power supply. So I'm going to shove that all the way through and get it out the way. And I'll push the 8-pin EPS connector for the CPU through the cutout here. And we'll need a couple more cables for SATA power. This is a modular power supply for the SATA power and for the the GPU power. So our GPU takes a single 8-pin connector. Alright, so I'll plug these 2 cables in here. Again, one for the SATA power and one for the 6-pin or the 8-pin PCIe power connector. And we'll just once again cram these both through to the other side of the case. Alright, so around to the back of the case here, we're going to push our 8-pin APS connector for the CPU up through this top hole and route it above the CPU fan here. So in higher end case, you would have a grommet along the top of the motherboard specifically for this. However, this case does not have that. So we're going to have to go through the side grommet and finagle our way in there. So it's pretty tight in this case, especially with that rear exhaust fan there. And really no room in the top, so I'm kind of struggling to get my hand in there enough to actually plug this cable in. So let's try and attack this at a slightly different angle, because the main problem is that I can't really see what I'm doing. And now you can't either. Alright, looks like that's got it. So I'll just push that cable back and make sure it routes above that top heatsink on the motherboard, so it's mostly out of the way. And we'll come around to the back of the case again. And we'll go ahead and route the 24-pin power connector for the motherboard. This is another one of the situations where it's going to take a bit of extra force to really get it to attach properly. So don't be afraid to kind of give it a little bit of muscle. You want to push it all the way until it clicks. If it snaps, you may have a problem. Now we're going to go ahead and install the graphics card, in this case the GTX 1060, 6GB variant. And you can see there the single 8-pin connector for power. We're going to take care of that in just a few moments. First, we're going to screw in the PCI bracket to hold it in place. Again, when you insert the graphics card, there should be a nice click whenever you put it in, whenever the retention arm on the PCI bracket locks into place. It only took a couple of tries. So now I'll put on the retention bracket for the PCIe slots, and then I'll drop it. And to the back of the case again, where we'll go ahead and push through the PCI Express power connector around to the front. Now this one has two 6+2 pin connectors on it. We only need one, so I'll put one 6+2 pin together and attach it to the 8-pin adapter here, and we'll just kind of tuck the other connector that we don't need to the side there. Normally I would say just get a zip tie or twist tie of some sort to tie that down. And we're going to go ahead and attach the SSD to this sled. So we put it into the drive cage, just like so. And around to the back side, we'll plug in the SATA connector for power. And I'm just going to take all these extra cables here, this extra cable length, and tuck it into the bottom of this drive cage where we have that extra space at, just to get it out the way. Perfect. And here's the SATA data cable. So I'm going to plug in the right angled connector side into the SSD, again to make for easier cable routing. And you can see my SATA data slots on the motherboard. We're just going to plug into the one that is labeled OS drive on this particular motherboard. Not all motherboards have that label on there, but this one does, so we'll follow it. And now I'm just going to clean up some of the cabling on the back of the case here. So there's some tie down slots for zip ties. I'm going to utilize those and kind of follow somewhat of the natural path that the cables seem to be wanting to go along here, which handily enough follows along with a lot of the same routing of these cable ties, the tie down slots that is. Alright, so that's cinched down good. And this side panel does have a little bit of a bulge in it to give you some extra cable management room. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and get the cables to line up more of side to side next to each other than to stack on top of each other. Because if they're stacking on top of each other, it's going to be harder to put the side panel on, basically. It's going to cause it to bulge out more. And then you see what I'm going to do here, there's no tie down slot down for this bottom left corner, but I'm going to use, there's a hole in the drive cage that I can route my zip tie through and actually cinch these cables down right there. So it's not going to hide them very well from the side panel. If you get decent lighting in the case, you're going to see this ketchup and mustard cable coming around through the backside and everything, but it's kind of the nature of this case being a budget oriented case. It doesn't have great cable management, and it doesn't have a lot of very good ways to hide the cables. So we're just going to make do with what we've got. Take me just a couple of tries here to get this zip tie to connect. Alright, so just make sure everything's tucked in nicely. I'm going to cinch this down a little bit more, as much as I can, to try and pull it in as tight as possible. And then I do have a couple of case fans to add to the front here. So we're going to turn to the front of the case. And to remove this front panel, you're just going to grab it from the bottom and give it a good tug. And it'll pop right off. So this is going to take some extra long screws to do to screw it in from the front, like I'm going to do here. So it comes with the fan pre-installed in the front, so you have 4 of those long screws, but here I'm going to use 2 on each fan since I'm putting 2 in the front and I don't have any more of those screws. So what I'll do is kind of put each screw in opposite corners from the other to try and reduce vibration as much as possible. So I'm going to put this one in the top right for this fan, and then the next screw will go in the bottom left. And you'll see to the right there's a little cable management hole there for the cables for the fans to go through. So I'm going to rotate the fans in an orientation so that the power cable for them naturally goes towards that hole. So got bottom left and top right for that fan. So for this fan, I will do bottom right and top left. Alright, so I'll just route those cables over to the side. And this motherboard actually does not have 2 fan headers within range of these 2 cables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a fan splitter that I happen to have. Alright, so I'll just go ahead and plug each of these fans into the splitter. And then plug the splitter into the fan header on the motherboard. So that way I can power both these fans from there, and that'll help me to hide the ketchup and mustard cables on the fan a little bit by being able to use this extension slash splitter, and that'll give me just enough length to kind of tuck those cables behind the drive cage. Alright, and we're ready for the first test boot. So let's go ahead and press the power button. Alright, all the fans are coming on. And we're looking for a BIOS post. Oh, alright, that's a good sign. And there's the ASUS splash screen. There it is again. And there we go, American Megatrends, with a couple of warnings there, just letting us know we have a new CPU installed and that no keyboard is detected. Alright guys, so hopefully you found that helpful. As you see, we got a successful boot. In the next part of this series, I don't honestly know when that's going to come out, because I've kind of had to repurpose that computer since I recorded the build. But in the next video in the series, I'm going to show you how to install Windows 10 on this machine and how to get that all configured, do some quick, easy stuff, and how to also do a system backup once you complete all your application installs. So if something ever goes wrong, you can easily do a reinstall of the operating system and not have to worry about, reinstalling all the games unless you've got new games since you made the backup. But you'll have some of your games already loaded, some of your applications and all already be loaded there, so it'll make your life a lot easier if you have to recover your operating system. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any other operating systems you want to see. I may do like a SteamOS install guide because I've actually never used SteamOS, so I'm kind of curious to check it out. A little late to the game on that one. And if the parts in this build are compatible, I may even look into doing maybe like a Hackintosh build with this. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys are interested in seeing something like that. So until next time, go ahead and make sure you hit that like button, get subscribed if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and like I said, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you want to see in upcoming videos, and I'll definitely take those into consideration. Alright guys, until next time, it's Johnny O, signing off.